Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour. We're here to recap last week's game, look forward to the roster cut, and who is our surprise cut and surprise make for next week's roster cut down. Grab your Lake Monster beer and join us for a fun show.
Welcome to Vikings Happy Hour, where we mix our favorite beverage and talk of your Minnesota Vikings. Skol!
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Vikings Happy Hour. The first time this season, by the way, that we have a full crew ahead of us. We have not quite had all of us combined at one time, and so it feels good to see both of you on the screen at the same time. Uh, Ryan, I wasn't expecting you to make it on time, so how are you this evening?
And I beat both of you guys here. I was surprised. No, I'm doing great. I was just telling Dave off camera here that our local high school that my kid eventually will go to, they put on like a community night for the north side of Lakeville, I guess.
Very cool.
And so a bunch of people are out there. All the third through eighth grade teams are out there on the field. The high school kids are coaching along with the high school coaches, and they're also coaching us on how to be better coaches. So it's just kind of a fun little event. They had food trucks and stuff there. So and I was just telling Dave he would be proud of my son. He actually went up against a much bigger kid than him and was able to land a pancake on that like one-on-one drill. So again, I wasn't expecting it. It was a surprise for me, but I'm glad that he was able to gain that confidence to do that.
I love it. I love it. Miles, how are you tonight?
Doing good. Just got the kids down for bed. Yeah, doing good.
The whole night's wide open for you now.
Super wide open.
Dave,
Mm-hmm.
good evening.
Good
This
evening.
is what your second show this week. How are you?
Well, I'm good. It's actually the third, but who's counting?
Is it?
Mhm.
Oh yeah, that's right. We have Tanishka's show now with the roster
Well,
cuts.
with the roster cuts, yeah. And we
Very
had
cool.
some yesterday.
Yeah, we did, and we'll get to that in this episode. Did either of you watch the full game in its entirety, or at least go back and check it out? Because I mentioned in the pre-show when we were off air that thank you, Joseph. Joseph said he's drinking some Elijah Craig. Um, I mentioned off air that it's kind of boring to watch these games because there are no starters in the like out there on the field. We did see in the first game the offensive and defensive line uh, just to kind of get some snaps under their belt before the first game were out there, but for the most part, we haven't seen our star players, and that can make for a lackluster preseason. So, did either of you get a chance to watch the game? And if you did you have any takeaways?
I was there. I took the family out to the game for the preseason, so it was live. So obviously, I don't get the views that you guys do on the TV view, but obviously, it was fun. The atmosphere was fun. It was loud, which was great. And watching the plays from my vantage point, you could definitely get some really good looks on both offense and defense, just depending on what quarter it is. So yeah, it was a lot of fun for me and the family, and it's an easy way to take the girls who always want to go to the games, but I can't really justify taking them to the regular season games, just given the cost of it and everything. So, but yeah, and to your point of like boring, right? Yeah, I mean they are typically a little bit more boring, but you pick out the players that you're rooting for, you pick out the players that you really want to see show growth, and you basically just zone in on them. So the whole game for me, it was basically zoned in on Asamoah, Booth, Evans, Scene, like all those rookies basically, and not Jackson Ingram. on the offensive side. Just all the rookies, really. I was just kind of keeping an eye on. I was excited to see Mond play until I watched Mond play. So that was another thing. But yeah, I mean, watching the progression. Actually, I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I've taken a liking to Tristan Jackson. Watching him play, he's just always open. Like it was kind of insane. I was watching him, and so I'm like, this dude's open again. This dude's open again. They like only looked his way one time or something like that. But yeah, it was fun to watch. I think. Miles.
Yeah, go ahead, Miles. Any takeaways from you?
Yeah, I was up at a cabin for the weekend for my mom's birthday, and my dad and I watched the game. My dad always has a comment, which is great. If the Vikings run up the middle, he's always like, "We need somebody that will run to the outside." So that's always his comment. But no, I mean the game was really boring. It's not even the fact that the starters didn't play; it was the fact that just like the backups, just especially the quarterback play, was just so poor.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were some highlights. I mean, it was nice to see guys like Austin Schlottman played pretty decent for a guy. When you're in a situation where I think Garrett Bradbury is going to be the starting center. I don't really think there's anyone else that's going to supplant him at this point. But if Schlottman can be kind of a decent backup, that's a positive. You want that. You want someone that can get in there if you need him to in a pinch. Guys like Patrick Jones has been someone I've been keeping an eye on all offseason, though, just because going into the season, I wasn't sure with the new shift what role he was going to play, but he looks like the third best edge rusher on the team. So
Yeah.
he's looked good. I liked the long arms, the physicality. You could tell he's starting to get more comfortable with that role. I said that last week as well, but he's someone I'm just excited to see progress a little bit more. And then I don't know, some of the guys like it was a boring game. Like Ryan mentioned, like Brian Asamoah, he's really fun to watch. I kept an eye on guys like T.Y. McGill, who's splashed, of course, right? Janarius Robinson, another guy, try to keep an eye on, see what he could do. The backup tight ends, I've harped on. I feel like all offseason is like, hey, can somebody step up? Can somebody, do something? Zach Davidson had the worst game of his life. Got open, but the dude just couldn't catch a cold. So that was unfortunate. So we'll see kind of what happens there.
Even Wanham had a couple of good plays.
Yeah.
Like what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
Like
he did.
You had to see some of that stuff.
But none of the running backs really did much. I think. I mean, that's not a negative toward them, but nobody really did anything. Tristan Jackson, to your point, Ryan, I thought he's looked good for a while. And I still think BC Johnson. I'll keep saying it, but I think he just looks better. He looks more smooth than I even think he did last year, or like before his injury. So I just think he's a guy that's popped. When he has played. So I'm kind of excited to see him bounce back a little bit. And those younger receivers, I kind of wish guys like Jalen Naylor had gotten a little bit more of an opportunity. Myron Mitchell, those guys didn't really seem to see much opportunity, but till late, which is a little unfortunate. But yeah,
probably a little bit more difficult for the wide receivers to really do much with the poor quarterback play. But I do definitely agree. I don't know if you guys saw my post last night, but I was watching a Caleb Evans in his tape because I feel like he's obviously a fan favorite, or at least on Vikings Twitter he is. And so I just wanted to see kind of how he was playing, and I don't know, I was pretty impressed just kind of watching his reps. I thought fundamentally he plays really well. You can see like the skill is definitely there. There's obviously some lapses in decision making, and his open field tackling was not the best on Saturday night's game. But I really do think he has a lot of skills that could potentially help this team. I have no doubt that he will make the team, probably as the fifth or sixth corner, maybe behind Chris Boyd. I still think there's a spot here for Chris Boyd. But Ryan, I am a little bit surprised that you didn't go on a longer tangent about your guy, Brian Asamoah, because everywhere I looked on Saturday and Sunday, that's the only name I saw when it came to the Vikings. people were enamored with his play, and he was kind of feeding off it too. Like you could see, I forget the play exactly, but he got somebody in the backfield, and he's like dog crawling and just hyping himself up, and the whole team's just, and he's got some crazy speed to him, it looks like, and some bursts. So I don't know if you want to talk about him quick, man. Not that I don't think
Yeah.
anyone wrote him off necessarily, but you can definitely, I think, say you're almost right. I'll give you
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, well, I don't think people are super excited about the pick just because we have Eric Kendricks, we just had signed Jordan Hicks, we had a third round linebacker in Chad Surratt from last year, Troy Dye. People are still clamoring for with his skill set, and then Blake Lynch. So I don't know if most fans really necessarily felt there was a need. But yeah, I mean, he's doing a lot of what he did at Oklahoma, right? It's a lot of just see it and go. Actually, in my opinion, he's actually learning a little bit, which is actually nice because at Oklahoma, it was literally what you kind of saw in game one, right? He sees it, he just bolts. And sometimes you overrun a play, or sometimes the lack of patience hurts you. And you can see that little bit more patience this time. Now, I almost want to say he was a little too patient at times watching the game this time, where I'm like, ooh, if you would have just went in there, that's a tackle for loss rather than like a zero gain, right?
I think
Or
someone
if
had a
you,
video of him just kind of like standing there for a second.
yeah, exactly. So, and that's good for him to do, I think, to process because, and then he can, kind of really diagnose where he needs to be. But it almost looks like he's playing slow. But and then, like you put in that clip that I think you posted today or maybe yesterday, um, he's so quick that he can just
Mhm.
shoot that gap real quick and still avoid the block. But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and just paint all rainbows and sunshine with him. I mean, he's still a
What?
smaller guy. He's gonna get eaten up by some bigger blockers, and he's got to learn how to disengage and make the tackle or take on that blocker and open up space for his counterpart to come in and make the play. So and not play too much hero ball that he really did have to play at Oklahoma. So but yeah, I mean, I think he's doing great. He's about as expected as I thought. When we drafted him on draft night, I'm pretty sure I even said he's going to be probably a good special teamer for us. He's going to probably be our first linebacker off the bench, and probably by mid-season he might be able to overtake Hicks. Hicks played really well in the limited action we've seen, so that might not happen. But we have a linebacker of the future on the squad now, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I came away pretty impressed, and I thought of you on Saturday when I saw his name circulating. So some moves happened earlier this week with some roster cuts initially, and someone mentioned in the chat here. So I'm going to toss this one to Miles, but Harrison Hand. I know this isn't the roster move that we're going to continue to talk about, but Harrison Hand was cut. Miles, any thoughts on him being let go? I think was this his second year, or is he on his third?
Going into year three.
Yeah, so pretty. I mean, if you don't have it, you don't have it. But I think I was a little bit surprised to see him go, at least in
Yeah,
this
I
wave
mean
of.
I think Hand had struggled to kind of find his footing with the old regime in 2 years. I'm not to say he was bad, but like as a fifth round pick, a guy that I think they'd hoped to see maybe be a little bit more of a nickel corner. He didn't really do much, and he had some COVID issues last year. I think he got COVID like 3 times during the season last year. Like, I'm not saying that played a part in him getting cut now, but like not being able to be on the field is a big problem, especially for a guy just trying to develop. And so
Yeah,
he had some decent flashes, I think, during the 2 preseason games he did play this year, though. But I think they just did it as a courtesy to him. They knew he wasn't going to make the roster. I think they have their ideal like cornerback situation, worked out, and so just to kind of give him opportunity before final cuts in the last preseason game, he got claimed by the Giants. So I think that goes to show that like teams around the league probably have a little bit of an opinion on him, which is a good thing. And so we'll see if he catches on. But I can't say it's like a huge surprise. I think maybe I was surprised he got cut now instead of the final 53. But again, I think that's just the coaches and front office doing him a little bit of a favor.
Well, since I gave you the Harrison Hand question, I will let you start off on the Nick Mullens trade and whether or not that spells the end for. I think it clearly spells the end for Sean Mannion, but I will be curious to get your thoughts on whether or not you think Kellen Mond will also be on the outs with this trade, or potentially
Yeah.
neither.
Well, to start, technically, the Vikings could cut Nick Mullens and not have to pay a seventh round pick for him before the season starts. Like they could technically do that. Again, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think they make a move like this, even a low level move like this, to not keep Nick Mullens around because he offers a little bit more than Sean Mannion does. I'm not saying it's like significantly more, but there's more. Nick Mullens offers more than Sean Mannion at this point, and so I think it does will likely spell the end for Sean Mannion. But I do think the coaches are being honest when they say that they're going to give Mannion another shot and see if with Mullens coming in for the last week and a half, 2 weeks, before cuts, or what is it, like a week?
A week, yeah.
They want to see what all three of the guys have going into the last one. I still think Mannion, even now, might have a slight edge over Kellen Mond, but I say that as an edge for like the preseason because to your point, Matt, I don't see them cutting Kellen Mond. I still think most teams want to have a developmental quarterback on their roster. Yes, Ideally, if you could put them on the practice squad, you do that. But I think the hard part would be squeezing Mond onto a practice squad. I'm not saying Mond is some worldly quarterback that you can't get on the practice squad, but I think there's at least a couple of bad teams around the league that might even want to consider putting him on their 53 just to get him in the building because there is potential there. I think we've kind of seen what Mond's going to be in his career, but there's still a chance that he could be a backup quarterback, and so I think the Vikings' best bet would be to keep Mullens, get rid of Mannion, and let Mond just continue to develop and learn, especially under a new regime. He's got new coaches, he's got new opportunity, and he's not the type right now you want to put him on the field in any sort of regular season game. So I just don't see the point in cutting him. I think it'd just be kind of a waste. You want to see if you could develop him even, and then in the offseason, if he's someone that you just don't see much of from the rest of the year or even during the season, then get rid of him. But I think give him another year, see how he does, and see how he can progress and grow under new coaching staff.
Yeah, but do you value keeping him on the roster on the 53 more than releasing him, opening up a spot for another position, whoever, our fourth or fifth running back or whatever it is, versus
go ahead.
Versus taking the chance that he does get picked up by somebody else, but there's also 886 people being released next Tuesday that the Vikings can't go out and find somebody that's in, roughly equivalent to Mond and bring in as a developmental quarterback that they can throw on the practice squad. You gain a player spot on the 53 and you're risking losing Mond, but we're sure you could find somebody else to replace him on the practice squad.
Well, so I don't think you need to try to find. I don't think Mond's being on the 53 impacts anything from the rest of the roster. We've seen other teams, the Vikings specifically, carry three quarterbacks and not really have an impact on who that 52nd person is that they'd be taking, 53rd person. That player is more like a special teams type, third string type player anyway. So I don't really see much value there. And if you had to, you could go find another player like that later in the season if you needed to find someone to come pick that up. Those types of players are easier to find to me than a developmental quarterback like Kellen Mond. But to that other part of that, Dave, you still have Mond under team control for 3 more years. So if you keep him on the 53, at least through this year, at least see what you have, and then you have next offseason, next training camp to see if there's any true progression there. And then if you want to cut him, then do it. But at least if he wants to grow into a backup quarterback and be good enough to be a backup quarterback, you have him very cheap for the next 3 years. Well, I'd say 2 because this one clearly he's not ready for that. But yeah, 2 more years as a backup quarterback with being really cheap. So I just don't really see the value in cutting him, and I don't think he'd come back to the practice squad here. I think he'd go somewhere else if it got to that point. If I was him, I'd do the same thing. I'd rather go somewhere else, see what someone else has to offer, But at the same time, yeah, I just don't see the value in cutting him right now. It just doesn't seem like you'd bring in somebody else that has any more upside than he does.
Yeah, and I think that there's enough quarterback hungry teams out there because the depth is not great across the league that somebody would stash him on their roster. I don't think he's going to be a practice squad type quarterback, at least for this season, if we did turn around and cut him. But let's talk about the guy they did bring in, Nick Mullens from the Raiders. Miles mentioned it, that it's a conditional 7th-round draft pick that the Vikings would have to get up, and that's only if he's active for one game. So really, I mean, they could technically keep him and just not ever activate him, and then they essentially got him for nothing. But with that being said, Ryan, I know we're on the same wavelength a little bit when we were talking about Nick Mullens. I don't think he's a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback by any means, but tell everybody kind of what you think about Nick Mullens and what he could provide as a potential backup to Kirk Cousins.
I mean, I could have swore you must have just looked at my tweet and just decided to just change a couple words and send that out. I'm joking, but it was very eerily similar, and I'm glad we are on the same wavelength here. So I think Nick Mullens is the type of backup quarterback that most of the fans have wanted for the last couple of years, not just this year, but for the last couple of years when we've had Sean Mannion at quarterback and knowing all too well that Mannion couldn't step into a game and hold down the fort for a game or two. And Nick Mullens has proven that he can do that. I think I don't know what his win percentage is or anything because I didn't do a ton of research before tonight about him, but I do know that I've seen him win games.
Five wins, I think, in 17 games played, but I think he's only started 12.
So so 5 wins out of 12, so 5-7, roughly.
Something like that, yeah.
And over 4,800 yards thrown in those 17 games.
Yes. So what you're getting out of Nick Mullens is actually going to be very dissimilar to Kirk Cousins in terms of game style. If anything, you're going to want to liken him to a Case Keenum, which is a fan favorite here in Minnesota. He's going to give you a lot of memories of Case Keenum because he's more of a gunslinger type who's going to step back into that pocket. He's less mobile than Case Keenum is, but he still can move around a bit. But he's going to take risks. He's going to give his receivers opportunities. And that's why when you look up his raw stats, you're going to see a lot of turnovers. But that's okay because out of your backup quarterback, you basically have to give it a try. You know what I mean? Because you're probably not going to be able to outwit a better starting quarterback than what you are. So you're going to have to take risks. And sometimes those risks pay off and sometimes they don't. As Dave mentioned, he is I think he was top 3 or one of the top 3 most passing yards in your first however many starts it was. I can't remember. And he can sling the ball and he's going to take risks, but that's going to come with some turnovers, which is going to make fans upset. But that's what you're getting out of a backup quarterback. And he's one that can come in there, be serviceable for a game or two, maybe 3. He's not going to, if Kirk's out for an extended period of time, he's not going to lead us to the playoffs. He's not going to turn in this Case Keenum wonder. I mean, maybe, but Case Keenum rode the coattails of a really awesome defense. And we just had a lot of luck, I think, that year. Great receivers, which we still have, but that negative regression reared its ugly head in the NFC Championship game. I guess I'll just say that. And even against the Saints when he threw that awful pick that kickstarted their comeback, right? So that's what you're getting out of this quarterback. I think you're going to be excited that you're not trotting Sean Mannion out there, but this isn't a backup quarterback like Patrick Mahomes. And I know what Patrick Mahomes is now, right? But back when you didn't know what Patrick Mahomes exactly was, this isn't Alex Smith going down and Patrick Mahomes coming in and being able to lead a team, or Joe Flacco going down and Lamar Jackson coming and leading a team, right? This isn't going to be this high potential player, but he's going to be like the typical backup quarterback that you see that is lifelong backup quarterbacks, like your Chase Daniels and whatnot. In my opinion, higher caliber. In my opinion, I think he's probably a top 5 backup in the league. But that's what you're getting.
Who is Nick Mullens?
Nick Mullens. Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of great backups in this league, in my opinion.
Dude, Teddy
Nick,
Bridgewater. No, Teddy Bridgewater. So if Nick Mullens was that good of a backup quarterback, he wouldn't have been cut by the last two teams he played for, and then obviously traded by the Raiders. Like I'm not saying Nick Mullens. Like I think Nick Mullens is as good as an option as you're gonna get, but he's not better than a Teddy Bridgewater or Tyrod Taylor. Like there are Gardner Minshew. Like there are plenty of backup. Like this is where the Vikings are at though. Is you either draft your backup quarterback because they're cheap. When you have, let me start. When you have an expensive starting quarterback, you either have to draft a cheap backup, or you have to pay. You have to get pay a pretty cheap price for a backup quarterback, which the Vikings have had to do outside of Trevor Siemian, where they traded a 5th-round pick and he cost a couple $1 million back in 2018, and 2019 I think he came back too. But and then it's been Sean Mannion since. Like you're gonna have to go the cheap route because you don't have the funds to pay for expensive backups and have that quality. And Nick Mullens, again, I don't think Nick Mullens and Case Keenum obviously too is in that same tier as like a Teddy Bridgewater, Gardner Minshew, all those guys. But like Jacoby Brissett's probably right in that range as well. But you don't have like the resources to improve. But like Nick Mullens for what you're getting, I think Nick Mullens is fine.
I wouldn't like a Teddy or a Tyrod, but like I put him right up in there with Jacoby Brissett. Shoot, in my opinion, and again because obviously he got let go from the Raiders because there's established chemistry with Jarrett Stidham and Josh McDaniels, right? Like I don't think that he's significantly worse than Jarrett Stidham, and they just weren't going to carry those three guys because those like. Stidham's young, so you don't need to necessarily have another third guy behind him. I think Nick Mullens can hold his weight against even like a Geno Smith. I really do. I really do.
I mean, and this is me saying that like I do think highly of Nick Mullens just in the fact that he has traits you can't teach, right? Like he's one of those players that he's got this undying confidence in his ability. He doesn't seem to be phased when he throws interceptions. He's got the improvisation like factor that a lot of quarterbacks sometimes don't have. But top 5, Ryan. I mean, Miles is listed off 6, 7, 8.
I might have been.
He would have ahead of them.
Well, think of it this way: a good
backup. I got
overzealous,
but like I think he's a top half backup in my opinion. Top half for sure. I might have got a little overzealous there. But, but still,
I can't.
A decent backup makes $5 to $10 million a year. We've got Mullens for 1.4. For the value, he's outstanding.
Well, we'll see.
Well, 1.4 is next to nothing. I mean, that's basically what we're paying the other two.
And what I say, like the top half backup, I'm not saying I'd take him over a bunch of those, but I just think that the skill level, because again, when you look at like some of the backup quarterbacks out there, they're going to be the young guys, right? Like Malik Willis, of course, I'm going to take him over Nick Mullens. Desmond Ridder, he might actually win that starting job, and Mariota might be the backup. But like, obviously, I'm going to take a guy like that over.
Tyler Huntley.
Yes, you're right. Tyler Huntley for sure. So, I mean, yes, obviously there's better guys. I got a little overzealous with that, but like he is going – I think he's a very solid, stable backup quarterback that I would feel very comfortable if Kirk tweaked an ankle and had to play 2 games, right? I'd feel very comfortable, which I never did before.
Listen, I think Nick Mullens is a fine backup. Like he's one of those guys, oh, cool, Nick Mullens is our backup quarterback. I don't really think much of it because – I honestly haven't thought much of our backup quarterbacks the last few years, but I just don't. I can't get on the same page with you, Ryan, just because I think if he was that much better as a backup quarterback, the value would be higher, and I think he wouldn't be bouncing around a little bit. But again, I'm fine. The move's a good move. Like the Vikings needed to make a move at the backup quarterback position over Sean Mannion, over Kellen Mond. They needed to do something. Nick Mullens was very cheap, both in cap and his expected, trade value. So like for what they spent to get a guy like Nick Mullens, very good move because he might not have come to Minnesota if he got cut and now you get him a couple weeks earlier. And
Yeah.
but again, I just don't think. I think if he was that good, they would have come in and been like, oh yeah, he's our backup quarterback. Boom. And I think that's going to happen anyways. But I just think there'd be more
They just had a
definitive
plethora,
notions.
man. They had Jarrett Stidham. Like, I mean,
No. I'm just saying in general. I'm saying even the Vikings when they traded for him, I think there'd be like more definitive like talk about him as like the backup quarterback. Again, I think what they're doing right now is just being nice. But I just think, yeah, it's not a big deal. I like Nick Mullens too. I'm just not as high as you guys are.
Maybe I took into too much of his 49ers tape of just the gunslinger mentality. I like players like that. So maybe I just
I'm with you.
enamored with that.
I'd rather have that as a backup quarterback than having a very vanilla someone that's not really willing to risk throws as a backup quarterback. So I like this style for sure.
Before we move on to the rest of the agenda or whatever, if we had Nick Mullens last season heading into Lambeau, would you have given the Vikings a shot? Because I think everyone wrote us off with Sean Mannion in there.
I mean, I wouldn't say we had a shot just because that team was too good. But like I said, if we were playing the Lions and Sean Mannion was the quarterback, I would say we didn't have a shot. Where with Nick Mullens, I would say we'd have a chance, right? Like
we lost to the Lions.
I know we did. I know. I'm just saying, like obviously we had no chance against the Packers. We barely have a chance against the Packers with Kirk Cousins, so of course we weren't going to have a chance with them again with Nick Mullens.
No, the Vikings weren't winning that game. The Vikings weren't winning that game with anybody but Kirk, and I don't think they're winning that game with Kirk. Just the way the team was trending, that was toward the end of the year. Things just hadn't. You could just kind of feel it, and then Kirk goes out. I don't think Nick Mullens has changed anything of how the Packers defense would have killed him in that game.
Fair enough. I had to ask. So, just want to give a shout out to everybody that's in the chat here tonight. Appreciate the comments. We're getting a lot of roster questions, which rightfully so. The topic of this show tonight is roster cut predictions as we head into the final preseason game. So I kind of want to check in with you guys and see. I was talking to you a little bit before the show. I feel like this roster cut down is going to be fairly easy of a decision, especially on the offensive side. There's conversations about maybe 4 running backs. Miles alluded to the fact that maybe you keep 3 quarterbacks. I think a lot of the conversation comes on the defensive line, but let's have fun with it, right? It's roster prediction. The games haven't started yet. It's fun to speculate. So are there any surprise cuts that you guys are thinking of? And I'll toss to you first, Ryan. Any surprise cuts or surprise makes coming next week?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is relatively straightforward, and we always say this, I feel like, and then every year there is at least one big surprise or one just like, whoa. Not so much a specific player, but can you just fathom the fact that there is a legitimate chance that 3 of our 4 third-round picks from last year are not on this team this year? Like, there's a legitimate chance. Like, Patrick Jones is a lock. He's going to be a lock for sure. But I don't think there's a path outside of practice squad for Wyatt Davis.
Yep.
Chaz Surratt had a couple decent plays last game, but overall he's looked quite poor. But there's a chance he makes it over Blake Lynch. But I think Dye, Asamoah, Kendricks, and Hicks are locks, so it's whether they want to keep an additional linebacker or not. I don't know. And then Mond, as we've alluded to in the chat earlier, and I was going to bring this up earlier, but we diverted over to Mullens. Mond actually looked decent on that first drive until the pick. And then that pick derailed him. Like, that's where I'm concerned, is that mental toughness. Like, as soon as he threw, because that drive was humming, he was making good throws, making good decisions, good pocket presence. Everything was going well, and then he underthrew that ball, and done. And the rest of I think he didn't even get it. He got one more drive. It wasn't a good one. And then he came in the fourth quarter.
Not to cut him, right? Right.
Yeah.
Maybe
because there's something there. Both of those throws that he had interceptions on, he didn't use his legs at all. Like, literally, it was all arm, just an all-arm throw, and obviously he underthrew both of those. But so I mean, there's a chance he gets cut or tried to get stashed on the practice squad. There's a chance. I don't think that happens, but even shooting 50% for 4 third-round picks in a year from a year ago, that's awful. That's awful. So that's something I'm interested in. And that might be a reason why he's no longer employed. And then going on podcasts or whatever he's doing and saying that he regrets cutting Daniel Carlson, like obviously. Like obviously. But yeah. Zach Davidson was making some noise early in camp, but he might have sealed his deal with that drop pass from Mannion where he probably could have housed it had he caught that ball or at least gotten a huge gain. I don't know of anything big surprise. You know what? Here's a surprise.
And I don't think they out on a limb.
I don't think they're going to do it, but I wouldn't
Don't.
What? Who do you think I'm going to say?
I have one that I want to say, and you haven't said it.
All right, Miles, you go ahead, and we'll see if we have the same guy.
I agree. I think what you're going to say, we're probably on the same page here. I don't think it's going to happen either, but Oli Udo is the name I was thinking.
No,
that again, I don't think he's going to get cut, but I don't think he's played very well, and I think Blake Brandel has done a better job, even just rotating in different positions, right guard, right tackle, left tackle. I think he's played better than Oli Udo has at least this preseason that I've seen. And so, again, I'm not saying he gets cut, but if that would be like one that I was like, oh, okay, that one would, take me back a little bit just because of what we've seen from Udo as like at one point last year, people are saying, could this guy be a long-term starter? Did we finally fix the right guard? Or even swing tackle? Like, there was a lot said about Oli Udo last year, but yeah, so that was just one name I had
and that's interesting because you're right. That would be a surprise, I think, to most fans, right? But you have Blake Brandel can play both sides, and then even if you keep Jesse Davis, he has right tackle experience. So you have somebody that can fill in if we needed both tackle spots taken care of. So that's who I was going to say.
Offensive line film for the last 2 weeks just to see what he's calling out here with Oli Udo and Blake Brandel.
Yeah, Brandel has played better than Udo.
Yeah. Who I was going to say, and again, I think it would come as a big surprise, and this is why I don't really think it's going to happen, but CJ Ham, you're paying a lot of money for a fullback that I know can flex out the tight end.
Isn't he listed as a captain?
Maybe. I have no idea.
But continue.
I believe so. He came out on one of the preseason games as a captain.
And again, this isn't me saying I want CJ Ham gone. This isn't me saying I think it's even going to happen. But if we're going out on a limb saying a surprise cut, I don't think it's going to happen. But you're paying, I don't know, like 2.5 or something like that mil for a fullback, which again, I think they're trying to incorporate concepts for him to be effective in the work that he's doing. Which I'm sure, again, he's been a very good player for us, I think, from that position. So I don't want it to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But if I had to say there would be like one that could happen and we're all just like, oh, I think that'd probably be it.
Let's talk through that one, Ryan, because real quick, Matt, let's talk through that one because it's an interesting thought. But I think the only issue there is if the backup tight ends were better, you might convince me that it could be a possibility. But the backup tight ends are trash, and CJ Ham can help cover a little bit of both. So, instead of having 2 tight ends or even 1 tight end on the field, you could have CJ Ham playing like a flex role, like an H-back type role a little bit where he motions and does some of those things and stays in line instead of having a tight end on the field at times. So I just think I think they're going to – yeah, I agree with you too. The idea would be holy shit, right? But yeah, if the backup tight ends were better, I think it'd be there'd be a potential claim, and I could see a team like the Browns trying to trade for CJ Ham, right?
No, I think that's a good point, and that's what I want to do here. I want to speculate big time, and make some reaches. So I went a couple different ways on potentials. I think one of the easiest ones that fans are going to go to, and I think it's more wishful thinking than anything, is Garrett Bradbury. But I think with last week's preseason inactive list, I mean, it was every starter. this, whether or not you like Garrett Bradbury, he is going to be the starting center week 1. And I would bet, at least barring an injury or just absolutely horrendous start to the season, he'll probably continue to be that guy. But it's not necessarily a cut that I have here for this person that I'm going to bring up, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Vikings traded Alexander Mattison, given what we've seen from Kene and Ty in this preseason. Now, I know last game they didn't play super well, but Mattison is not coming back to this team after this year, and I don't know what you could theoretically fetch for a guy like him, but he's proven that he can play in this league, and there are teams around the league who need running backs still. So it would not surprise me to see Mattison off this team next week with a trade, not necessarily a cut. They would not outright cut him, but definitely a trade.
And you'd assume that probably would happen like this week, right? So they have time to acclimate to the new offense and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it's logically, yes, it makes sense. Do I think it happens? Probably not. But I would do it if I was a GM and I had a team that was interested. But there's also players getting cut that are not awful running backs, like Kenyon Drake. He just got cut this week. And I don't know what he has left in the tank or what have you, but like, he's been a serviceable, if not even good, running back in this league at points in time in his career. So Myles Gaskin is another guy who likely is on the chopping block and could be traded. So I mean, there's only so many needs at the running back position across the league, and there's quite a few, I think, options out there.
What would be the threshold for you guys to move Mattison? Like, what would you need back?
I don't really need much, to be honest. I mean, knowing he won't be here next year.
Would you move him for a fifth? Like, if you woke up and saw that the Vikings moved him for a fifth, would you take it?
I'd be fine with the sixth.
Then? You'd be fine with the sixth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my thing with Mattison is I don't expect them to trade him, but I do think if an injury happens, let's say we get to the trade deadline during the season and the Vikings are, kind of out of it, things aren't going as well as you'd hope. I could definitely see that situation happening where they move an Alexander Mattison for a late round pick, just because they want to get the young guys an opportunity. But I think the difference between this Kevin O'Connell run Vikings is, like, I know we want to make it look like Sean McVay and what Sean McVay does. Mm-hmm. The Vikings are still very much a very similar offense to what we've seen the last few years. Yes, we have a different play caller. Yes, it's an offensive-centric team, but it's very similar. So they like to have multiple running backs. I think Mattison is a better backup running back than most in the league. So I think there's value to an Alexander Mattison for them, especially since Dalvin Cook struggled to stay healthy at times and those things. And it's not that Kenny Nwangwu and Ty Chandler can't step in and be those guys, but I just don't – I think they view those guys long-term. I don't think they want to just move. I don't think they just move an Alexander Mattison because I don't think those two guys are so good right now that it makes Alexander Mattison like dispensable. But at the same time, I'm of the light, like, if you can get value for him, trade him. But I just don't see it. I don't expect it to happen.
Right.
So just before we get to what players have to do this week to make the team, if there's any players that can still make an impact, do you think the Vikings carry 4 running backs then?
5 if you include Ham. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very possible. So this is where the numbers are going to get difficult, and this is why, like, Miles' suggestion of potentially an Oli Udoh might get cut or something like that, right? Is that you have 4 running backs and a fullback, so 5 running backs total, and then you also have this competition at receiver where, yeah, you have 3-4 locks probably, right? In Justin Jefferson, 5. Thielen, Osborne, ISM, and then likely BC. Like, BC's played well, and then you have that 6th spot. Is that going to Tristan Jackson, Myron Mitchell, Jalen Naylor? are you comfortable putting Naylor on the practice squad, or are you worried about him getting cut? So there's been talk about maybe carrying 7, or having, you don't want to cut a Tristan Jackson when he's playing well, or a Myron Mitchell when he's playing well. So it's like, do you try to stash him on the practice squad? Because there are a lot of guys in the league that can play receiver. So do they carry 7? Well, then what does that do to the numbers? Because typically in a team, you're going to carry 3 quarterbacks potentially, and then that means that you're at 3 running backs and 6 receivers. So where do we give, right? And that's going to be the hard part for this team to decide over the next week plus, or not even week plus. I think it's Tuesday's the cut down day. So over the next week, you're going to have to really see somebody either separate themselves enough to say we're done, or we're going to have to make some tough decisions on like the O line or D line and go a little light there.
So you kind of mentioned some guys at least in the wide receiver room that you like, Tristan Jackson being one of those. Are there any other players that you feel their performance this weekend could play a factor in whether or not they make the team? Like, how many spots, I guess, do you think are truly available to be had this weekend, or is it pretty much made up?
Punt return.
Close.
Miles is shaking his head no.
Maybe the 4th safety. Maybe the 4th safety could be it.
You think they hold?
Metellus balled out last game. I was calling to bring in Jamar Johnson who got cut from the Broncos. I was calling to bring him in, but I thought Metellus actually played well last week. So he might have earned his spot. He might have.
Yeah, he's been a solid. I guess maybe the other one is like that depth corner, like a Perry Nickerson, Nate Hairston, those guys. But I think one of those 2 guys is already. I think they have like 90% of the roster as a locks. And to be honest, I don't think much of most teams, especially with the new formatting and stuff. I don't think the preseason holds the same weight that people think it does. Yes, it matters because it gets tape out, and like I think it's more important for these guys across the league than it is with where they sit with the Vikings. Because if they were going to cut them, the Vikings were going to cut them. Like, I don't think this preseason game would completely change anything unless someone like went like Herculean on a game. But even then, we've seen guys like that happen. Kyle Sloter, and the Vikings will still cut him. And I'm not even trying to defend Kyle Sloter, but like you could do really well in preseason games, but like we don't know what's going on in practices. We don't know what's going on in meeting rooms.
Right.
Like those types of things, all that stuff matters. So I would expect like 90-95% of the roster is already like locked. And obviously injuries can change some of that, but like, so obviously, hope nothing major happens, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I think we're really looking at probably maybe that last receiver spot, maybe the last tight end spot. I think offensive line's probably locked in, right? And then defensive line.
Yeah, but the question there is like, do you keep 9 offensive linemen, right? Like that's why I like Oli Udoh could be an odd man out because like you keep 9 guys because Chris Reed. You have a lot of interior guys though. That's the crazy part. Like we're not used to that. They have a lot of interior offensive linemen right now. Jesse Davis can obviously flex a little bit, like Chris Reed, Schlottman, and then obviously Ed Ingram into that mix as well. But the interior O-line's got a little bit more depth than we've seen in a while. So, but yeah.
Yeah, and then the other positions that I was going to say is, like you had mentioned, probably the last corner spot, and then the last linebacker spot, which is what I was talking about earlier. Are we going to just carry 4?
Yeah.
Or do we, because we need that extra one to carry an extra receiver, an extra running back, or are we going to carry so I think if Chad Surratt can ball out this week or Blake Lynch can ball out this week, they might be able to get themselves that 5th spot or that 5th linebacker spot. A defensive line, I think it's pretty much covered, but like, does Twyman make it, or is it that kid from Minnesota make it, right? Like, I think there's a couple just small things like that.
I'll be honest. I don't think Twyman makes it. I've been watching some of his stuff, and it's not that he doesn't have potential, and he's obviously built right. Like, but it just kind of looks sloppy out there.
He hasn't returned to his pit form.
No,
since being recovering from the gunshots.
Yeah, so I could see him as a practice squad candidate for sure, but
him and Tristan Jackson. I think Tristan Jackson's a good practice squad. I feel like you drafted Jalen Naylor. I'm not saying you couldn't get him through waivers, but drafted players in their rookie years are usually a little harder to get through waivers than guys that have been in the league for a couple of years. But we'll see.
I mean, he's a 6th-round pick, right? Was he 6?
Yeah. It was 6. I'm not saying that they couldn't get him through waivers. I'm just saying at times, that's when scouts and other teams, they have more excitement about those guys because they were just drafted. So like those scouts that really like that player in the late rounds, we could be like, bring that guy in, those types of things. So
yeah, for sure.
The other thing when it comes to at least the roster cuts next week is we have no idea who other teams are going to cut and who we might potentially bring on board. So that also plays a factor. Any final thoughts as we kind of round out this show? I mean, we're heading into the last preseason game. We'll break it all down next week, but any final thoughts from you two?
No, nothing really. I mean, like I said, I think that there's some excitement to be had around Kwesi's first draft. I will say that. I mean, you take a look at Steen, he looks like he's covering the field at an incredible rate there. Booth looks like he's bringing energy to that defense, and obviously he's hurt right now, so we wish him a speedy recovery. But you have him out there playing relatively well. Ed Ingram, it looks like he might have secured that starting right guard spot, right, as a rookie, which is obviously great to see. Brian Asamoah, again, core special teams guy, priority backup. Caleb Evans, fan favorite, just super interactive with the fans. He was telling people to follow him on Instagram and DM him, and he'll respond. I did that, and I haven't gotten a response yet, but I did tell him to check out the show. I told him to get on the show here. I will. Yeah, if he responds, I'll.
We got an open week coming up here in a couple of weeks, so
yeah, he'll be too busy at that point.
Dead space before the Packer game.
Yeah. And then you have guys like Naylor and Nick Muse. Again, I don't think he's doing much, but like you have some of these other guys where it's like, okay, let's see what you got. The kid, I don't know how to say his name, but the kid from Oklahoma, I always forget his name. Or Oklahoma, Minnesota. The kid from Minnesota.
Odamuewo or something like that.
Yeah. So like, let's see what these guys have. It looks like it's been a relatively solid draft where your first 4 round picks are awesome, or they're playing relatively well, or above what your expectation was.
Could be the best draft class we've ever had.
Well, probably not better than 15, but it's looking pretty good.
You don't think it could be better than 15?
I'm just saying, probably, dude. That produced so much good talent. Come on. You got Hunter Kendricks. God, Stephon Diggs. Like, come on now.
That means a lot coming from me because Diggs came out of that class. So,
but like the crazy part about that, Matt, is like you would need at least one of these guys to be as good at their peak as a Diggs, Hunter, or Kendricks, and those 3 guys at their peak are like all pro level players. So can we get one all pro out of this draft class? Like
that's still not even.
That's why I think it's
maybe you get 4.
Yeah.
I'm just reading the comments here, but I think we can call it. I'll address it. If the Vikings win the coin flip versus Green Bay, do we showcase our offense first or defense?
No.
I saw Miles chuckle when that came in.
Just defer. Come on.
Are you defer too, Miles?
Yeah, I'm always team defer. I like to get the ball in the second half because
it's a competitive advantage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
especially at home. All right, that's all I have. We don't need to keep talking about this stuff, at least for this week. So for everybody in the chat, thank you very much. And I forgot to mention when the show started, but as always, this show is sponsored by Lake Monster Brewing in St. Paul, Minnesota. Make sure you head over there. They have a beautiful patio that you can check out as the fall weather comes around the corner.
And they also have a new beer.
They do have a new beer, Purple
Gold.
Rain.
Well, Purple Rain, no, but they just added this week in goblets Golden Oat Belgian Ale.
Oh, that sounds
Mild
Sounds
and tired.
fantastic.
Friday.
Hey, what are you
Yeah, I'm
guys
getting
doing?
that one for sure.
Let's get together. What are we doing? We got to get together for those. I need
We'll
to try
talk.
both of those new beers, so we'll talk to that offline. Yeah, we're good.
If you're still listening to the show and you're still watching here tonight, remember our goal is 4,000 subscribers by the end of the football season. We're almost to 2. So if you can help us get past that mark, if we can get to 2,000 by the start of the season, that's incredible. So tell your friends, tell your family, make fake accounts. We don't care how we get there, as long as we get there.
Joseph, that's not happening, Joseph. Just a quick heads up. That ain't happening. I won't be a part of that. I won't be a part of that shit. Just know that. I won't be a part of that.
I won't be on that show either. I don't need to be swearing on angrily swearing on YouTube. So.
And I was about to say thank you to Miles and Ryan for joining. It was fun to have a full crew this week. I'm so excited for the actual regular season. Dave, thank you for producing. Next week, there might be a guest. Stay tuned on a guest.
Caleb Evans?
Well, maybe him. Maybe a local media person. I think is well perceived by a lot of fans. At least on Vikings Twitter. I'll give a potential spoiler if he accepts. He was off Twitter for quite a while, and then he just recently came back. So, but that's all I have. We'll break down roster cuts next week, the preseason game, and then we'll dive into regular season coverage. So, Dave, why don't you take a wrap on the show and let the fans know what's coming next?
What is next is Two Old Bloggers on Saturday at our normal time, 4 o'clock Central, which is the perfect time for your pregame show before the game Saturday night against the Broncos. And then, of course, in the final 2 minutes of that game, the final score will go live, and we'll have fun. Maybe they pull this one out. Maybe Denver doesn't have any interest. But it'll be fun to watch and to see who steps up. And to see if one of those bottom guys in the wide receiver room, because that seems to be who they're pulling from, wins that punt return job, because nobody stepped up so far, and special teams coach is still wondering why somebody hasn't. We need that. It's a good way to make the roster. What do we say?
Skol Vikings.
Skol Vikings. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell, and rate us on your favorite aggregator. And a special shout out goes to our partners, the Daily Norseman, where the best Vikings content can be found, and to Lake Monster Brewing, home of the best beer in Minnesota. Skol, everybody.